Or for a second. And then um, first of all, I cannot speak Spanish, so apology. First of all, thank you for inviting me to all the way to. I'm very happy to be here. Well, I have been at Enga for several years. So, the Agua in Spanish, um, Japanese. So, common topic. So, but still highly interesting. I'm not a first name. So let's start. More like large domain hydrologic modeling, and then I'm gonna just briefly overview a collaborative work. This is Boulder. So Boulder is located close to Denver, biggest city in state of Colorado, 30 kilometers northwest. The Boulder is located in the foothills. And then here is Enka. And this is Boulder downtown. That PH is a typical view of Boulder. So Enka is located up in the hill, and the university. Big lab for NOAA. NOAA is national, like a government agency doing a lot of climate, water, ocean research. Iconic kind of feature, like a so Enka, is operated by UCA, which is University for Atmospheric Research. It was funded by National Science Foundation, which is another government agency. UCA has 7 entities and then 6 like science laboratories. I'm located in, I belong to a research application lab. And the research application lab is just like an engineering, more like engineering type research, focusing on like actionable science. So we kind of trying to do technology development, also have to do transfer to society. And then it's pretty wide range of type of research, multidisciplinary, including hydrology and climate. Some people do aviation, like weather. People working on different things. I'm a hydrology person. So, so in a lab, there's some smaller groups. I belong to a computational hydrometeorology group, and then number of people belong to group, and then doing many different like hydrology, climate related to. This is kind of showing for last several years, and then routing, and then some of parameter estimation for Alaska, Hawaii climate change studies. And then most of research funding coming from a government agency, including flood estimate for yes, and also Bureau of Reclamation, which is focusing on reservoir management for Western U.S. Some of funding from NASA, you may know, and then NOAA, and then some of them are National Science Foundations. So moving to actually my work. First of all, like I'm talking about mostly river network routing. So okay, river model is kind of people neglected somehow, but it's important because for like Earth system science, river is major like terrestrial transport system for water and then its constituent. Constituent means like water include like nutrient or maybe heat. We have to understand the water temperature, and so the river carries those kind of stuff from land to ocean. So it's important. It's needed to understand global water cycle, and also some people care about a global geochemical cycle. And then because river carries its nutrients, especially like dissolved carbon and nitrogen from a land to ocean. That's some people are very interested in that cycle. And the other thing, so most of Paulo's group is care about more water resources application. This is the same for US. So we need a river model to do a river forecast for a day to maybe 7 days ahead, and also we have to use river model to do like a sub-seasonal to seasonal water forecast. So how much water can be water is available in next and end of water years, or even on climate change, how much climate change the availability in end of century. So it is important for reservoir management, and reservoir located in a river. So we need to do a river model to understand what's going on in the water. So agency or water management can better planning for water. So that's why I've been working on routing for several years. I started probably 2015. So work focusing large domain, so we can run like a large river basin like Mississippi River, example North America, and then we wanted to be able to a river model for large or multi-decade or even century long, so we can do a climate change study. And the biggest saying element that's different than the past river model is using a river network. Let's go over one slide, next slide. And then, so that's kind of one factor of work. And recently we extended to mizu route to a global domain. So mizu route in a climate in ENCA, which is community earth system model. But if we run a mizu route or river model in a global wise, we have to make it faster. So otherwise we cannot run it, and it takes too long to run a global domain. So we kind of spent some time to develop parallel computing scheme. I'm not talking about this today, but this was a big chunk of work. And then now trying to include more different type of routing scheme. I'm basically trying to improve mizu route. And I'm interested in implementing tracer capability so we can transport constituent. And also last couple of years, I've been collaborating with University in Canada to implement lake model. And then so we can do many type of simulations for many type of applications. So so I'm going to talk about just how river and catchment, basically river system, is represented in a river model. So in the historically, people used gridded river network. So something like this. Oh, yeah. So something like this. So catchment is represented kind of a grid box, and then water can move only one of the neighboring grid box, depending on the elevation. But the reason is moving into more realistic representation, which is vector river network. Basically, catchment is represented in a polygon, like a catchment HRE polygons, and then river segment is represented in a line. And so comparing to representation, it's vector realistic. And then you can make it to more realistic for gridded network by increasing gridded network, but it's increasing computational cost. So vector network is supposed to be much more computationally efficient, but representing better catchment on the river. And then also one thing I want to mention is lake implementation is much easier to do in a vector river network. It's sometimes tricky because lake is sometimes located covering multiple grid blocks. So it can be tricky. It's actually tricky. So this is, I'm gonna just talk about how mizu route works in the overall. So mizu route works in a vector network. So I have a 3 kind of hypothetical catchments here. So mizu route takes like a runoff, which is coming from a hydrologic model or any land surface model. And then mizu route can do overland hill slope routing to put runoff on a land to a river channel. And then mizu route does river reach routing using many different routing scheme, so we can get stream flow. And then to do that in the over big river basin, like Colorado River Basin, this is the only upper portion of Colorado River, but it's 290,000 square kilometer. So it looks like this, including 80,000 segments, river segments. So basically, we have to route through from headwater to outlet here. So we need to compute first routing order, which is just the order of routing. So basically, 1 is headwater, and routing is done in the very early, and then very end of like routing is done at the outlet. So this is just kind of showing how routing can be done in big river basins. So mizu route, including right now 4 different routing schemes. I'm listing here. Each routing scheme has own pros and then cons, and some of routing fast, but more physics, but more taking computation time. And then you can use like a fast, for example, IRF. I'm gonna just talk about this in the next slide, but fast. So you can use climate change study, but the physics is not much strong. But the kinematic wave for Muskingum Kanj diffusive wave, a little bit slower, but it can be used for more forecast, right? We need a more finer time scale river flow. So IRF, again, I'm using this kind of imaginary basin. If you want to get the stream flow at point 3, if you need IRF is just a definition. If you're taking a hydrology class, you might know unit hydrograph. It's same meaning in hydrograph. The unit hydrograph is hydrograph resulting from 1 unit of runoff during time step. So this is basically unit hydrograph. And then if you have input runoff at 1, and then if you do a convolution, you get the time series at the 2. And then next is after routing S2 channel, and then you can do same thing for S3. And then kinematic wave tracking, this is more very complex. This is more like a Lagrangian. So you can think runoff coming into channel as a particle. The water particle has some physical properties like and then discharge. Based on this information, we can track each runoff throughout the river network. So it looks like this. You track each particle, and then if you visualize along the river network, one kind of see how water is maybe moving through. Get like a stream flow. You kind of integrate steps, and then like which particle part at the point 3, and then you can over the time, so you can get the potential at time. So that's the kinematic way of tracking. And then, so those two are less commonly used for routing in the community, but more commonly used routing is based on the same linear equations. You might, so basically, continuity equations, and then momentum equations, and then these kind of variables you can see from kind of the river cross sections. So so if I use everything momentum equation, and then if you solve in a numerical scheme, it's gonna be dynamic wave. This is complex, more hydraulic routing. But you can kind of simplify it, including only 3 terms in the momentum equation. It's gonna be diffusive wave. And then further, if you eliminate pressure force, it's gonna be kinematic wave. So you can all this kind of equations in a numerical scheme, so you can get kind of different feature in a simulated hydrograph. And then another method I want to mention is Muskingum kanji. Muskingum kanji is based on a kinematic wave, but I'm not talking about detail. But this is commonly used in the U.S. Actually right now. The NOAA is using Muskingum kanji to do a flood forecast. And then you can look at the basic open channel flow textbook to understand what actually Muskingum kanji is. So what I did is here, and then I ran a mizu route in a 4 different routing scheme at the mouth of Columbia River. Columbia River is another big river based in the U.S. And then I ran an hourly time step for 1 year, and then I aggregated daily and then monthly, and then you can see compare with diffusive waves versus 3 different other routing scheme. You can see scatters, but almost 1-to-1 line along the scatter is along the diagonal lines. But if you aggregate daily and monthly, routing method gets closer. Simulations get closer, except IRF, because IRF is very different routing scheme. And then using different parameter set, kinematic wave, Muskingum kanji, diffusive wave use same parameter set, and then based on same kind of equations. So it's relatively similar, but IRF is very different type of routing. So and then it's a little bit different, but so you kind of have to aware each routing scheme has kind of different, give you a different answer. So we have implemented, this is kind of a North America simulations. So basically, I don't know how many river segments in, but left side is some sinus variance simulation, and then it's river flow simulations. So another thing we did is collaboration with University of Saskatchewan in Canada. Mostly Siobhan Galari worked on this. So he implemented lake in a mizu route, and also created river-lake network, so we can run a river and then lake simulation like this. So if you look at the comparison with observation, this is kind of 7 years daily water lake level simulated versus observations. And then yeah, Canada is very Canada has a lot of lakes, and then they are really needed. So that's why he wanted to implement lake. So another thing Siobhan did, expanded like a global scale for lake implementation. Apologize, this is kind of busy, but so he's showing 4,200 lakes. Data set is called hydro lakes, and then he connect lake into like a river some product river network HDMA, and then actually he simulated global river and then lake simulations, and then this river network only connected to a lake. The color code will then indicate how different between river simulation without lake and then river simulation including lake. So darker color has more impact, much, and then lighter lake impact is red. So as you see, like just downstream of lake, more impacted, simulation is impacted. But if you go downstream, lake has less impact on the river flow. And then another thing, Shivan is kind of interesting. And then so actually, looking at this is Saskatoon in Saskatchewan, and then there is a river is coming from this way, and then there's a big lake here, and then this is outlet, this is inlet, and then Mizura can input observed stream flow directly, so we can replace simulated flow with observed flow, and then you can route downstream. So that's what he did at here, and then simulate lake volume. And then he did is he used like it's called target volume mode, which means you can provide target volume each time step, and then like a lake volume exceeds the target, excess water is outlet. So that's simple, actually simple method, and then that's what he did, and then simulated and then downstream at the here at the Saskatoon there's a gauge, and if you compare with observation, it's fairly good result, because observed flow is completely managed, and then we can get this in a naturalized river, I mean without lake simulations. And then so that's river network routing. And then next topic is large domain hydrologic modeling. And then this is I came to 2011 in the NCAR, and I studied this in maybe past 3 years. So, and then yes, so large domain hydrologic modeling means, okay, we want to run a hydrologic model anywhere in the domain, no gap. And then we're looking for more global, continental, and then at this large scale river domain like Mississippi or Colorado. And then this is kind of showing simulation at the 12-kilometer soil moisture simulation. And then yes, application is similar to river model. We have to have hydrologic model for seasonal to daily short-term river forecast, and then also some people interested in drought monitoring, and then also hydroclimate projection need hydrologic model too, and so it's important. And then so we've been using again gridded hydrologic model configuration, but Martin Clark, which is my former mentor at NCAR, he moved to Canada, but he was advocating, okay, we can make it more flexible way to be a spatial discretization for hydrologic model too. So what he's suggesting is, okay, if you have a domain, maybe basin can be discretized in a gridded, like we do. But also we can split basin domain, like model domain, into catchment. So Martin called this DRU. And Martin didn't stop here, and then he tried to suggest, okay, we can further split GRU into different kind of spatial units. For example, if you don't use same nodes, no split. This is just a lamp. So DRU, HRU, same. And then you can split GRU into grid. Also, more you can split GRU into more complex polygons. For example, elevation. Domain. And then grid or catchment. Grid or polygon. So what we need to do more is to do a catchment-based configurations. Yes. So talking about SUMA, I think you might have heard about SUMA. You might have seen this many times. But so SUMA is very flexible, and then SUMA is basically modeling framework and then compiling many process physics. So he's showing this outside dash trophy is like a process, physical process, trying to simulate flux, water flux, or sometimes energy flux. And then energy, so flux affecting states like a temperature or soil moisture or snow water equivalent. So you can use flux computation using many different like parameterization. We call parameterization basically different equations to compute flux. So in the SUMA, you can kind of decide which model parameterization used for each like a flux. So it's very flexible. And then in the end, if you decide model physics, and so SUMA does, basically compiling all state flux equation and state equations, putting in a big matrix, and then solving this big matrix to get the all flux and then states at the same time at the per spatial unit and then per time step. So this is actually very different approach to solve hydrologic model than a previous like model. So this is kind of unique, and then people start using this, but they're still 5 years old. So we're still learning how it behaves SUMA. So, but I think Dr. Mendoza, Pablo is interested in. So so we kind of yeah, looking forward to working with SUMA more. And then, so what I'm doing is trying to implement SUMA in Columbia River Basin in the U.S. Columbia River Basin is another big river basin, important in the U.S. about 670 square kilometers, and you can see a scale here, and then how big you can tell. Maybe you can see how big it is. So I implemented SUMA in Columbia River, and then I put base theory. There's about almost 10,000 GRUs catchments, and then if you remember a couple of slides before, it's no HRU. So HRU GRU is the same. So SUMA is running for each kind of polygons, and then. So in the mizu route implementation, we use different catchments, more a little bit finer resolution catchments, river network. So actually number of catchments is twice as SUMA. So this looks like how like a river network. So there's about 10-20,000 catchments on the river segments. And then I've been working on the customer calibration too, so I'll select some basin within the Columbia. We picked basin based on locations, and then try to calibrate. And then you see, so this is kind of a result. It's y-axis is KGE, like a skill score. So 1 is good, and then 0 is not good, and then this is all basins, and I'm kind of showing like a ascending order. So, but the median is about 0.745. But you can see some of model subbasins are not behaving good. There's many reasons. Some porting is not good, some locations, and then also I think this is like flow data, which means actually at the reservoir we don't get never natural flow, so somebody has to reconstruct naturalized flow so we can use for hydrologic model. So, but sometimes very well constructed. That's one of the reasons. And another thing is SUMA sometimes doesn't capture actual behavior. And then also I've been working on some multi-basin calibration because I want to like optimize everywhere in the Columbia River Basin, but we can calibrate only selected sub basins. So what I do right now is trying to select 10 like good basins, and then trying to do a concatenate basin calibration. That means like a objective function to calibrate is mean over 10 sub-basin KGE, and then we're trying to adjust like a single model parameter multiplier that can be applied to 10 basins. So once you calibrate, that multiplier can be applied to everywhere in the domain. And then if you simulate over the Columbia and then looking at the whole like a red points like flow sites, and then looking at the 2 years flow, 5 years flow, and then 10 years, 20 years flow, and then I get the something like this. So I'm still working on this, but we're trying to improve this performance in the Columbia. Yeah, so finally I'm gonna just go through some collaborative work we've been doing with Pablo's group. So one of the work, this is Pablo's students, Ulysses, was doing a big model parameter sensitivity analysis. He's done amazing work. He compiled like many basins in Chile consisting like 5,000 grid cells, and then looking at the how big parameter affecting simulations. So this is it's kind of big summary plots. So this is big parameters, 43 parameters. This is soil parameters, vegetation parameters, and then snow parameters. And then each panel is kind of like a flux or states metric. Like you can see a peak snow water equivalent and then runoff ratio. So each parameter, sensitivity of each parameter is different based on, depending on what the metric use. The axis for each panel is index, the higher sensitivity. So you can see big picture of like parameter sensitivity, and so I think this is almost close to be published in test. So yeah, this was amazing work. So another work is going on is so Fabio he's looking at how like a subgrid elevation band configuration affects hydrologic simulation. So this is one of, he was looking at the many basins, but this is one basin, Mapocho River at Cross. And then so Mapocho River, you can see a grid box for a big model station area, and but this grid box has like a different elevation range. So this is showing like elevation, kind of showing elevation range for each grid block, and then color coded one is number 1, 2. But you can see how each. So it's trying to capture like elevation effect on the simulation including band, but we don't know how to configure. So he was looking at like for example, if you implement like a 100-meter interval or 200 interval or 500 meter and 1,000-meter interval elevation band. And if you compare with no band elevation simulation, like a top, and then this is kind of showing a difference between top and base. And you can see where the impacted and then different, and then so each column is kind of different variable rainfall, snowfall, like snow and ET, and then depending on the variable looking at, it's completely different sensitivity too, and then it's kind of interesting, and then it's almost, I think, submit to journal. And then another thing is both Nico, yeah. So the Nico focus is implemented 200 basin. It's implemented mizu route in the 200 basin. I think she did manually. So he basically delineated like a river network for each lead basin across series. And then this is kind of showing one zooming like a housing river basin. So it looks like this, and then here river model, and then showing animations here. So and then now I think post Nico is trying to look at how routing implementation is affecting river flow. So this is going on. So I think that's all I have. And then again, I wanted to thank you for everybody. And yes, if you have any questions or some comments, I'm happy to hear. Yes, thank you.
Naoki, for such an interesting talk and for your time in collaborating with us and for preparing this presentation. So, okay, yeah, gracias. Thank you very much. So, we are happy to take questions for Naoki. If you want to, you can formulate your questions in English or in Spanish, and I can translate to Naoki if you want to. Okay.
Naoki, thanks for your presentation. How much time does it take to calibrate the Suma model in the Columbia River Basin?
Like, it's okay like this. So Suma is a little bit computationally expensive, and then depending on how you specify parameter values, and then what the parameterization use, it's different timing. But in generally, like 12 hours, I can do about 200 to 300. Yes, and yes.
Does Suma run in parallel?
It's similar to a big model. You can do manually parallelize. Yes. Yes, yes. Should I go back? Maybe I should go back.
different from the rest of the landscape,
Yes.
and that can influence any metric used to calibrate any hydrological model.
Yes. Yes. Can impact.
So I believe that software take of the roughness in multi-calibration.
I would say no. Yeah, mostly my group, my coworker, and you, yeah, we not calibrating IRA parameters, but the kind of discussing we should calibrate or not, but because the IRA parameter is not distributed, it's a constant, which is not actually appropriate. So we're not doing calibration. Mostly trying to, compensate, more like compensating, calibrate Xuma parameter for mizu. Yes, definitely. So in generally, dry basin is difficult because if you think there's not much water, it's moving. Hydrology is struggling to do low flow in general. In the U.S., dry basins usually not performing well, even calibrated model. I'm sure here too. If you have a more water, it's easy, but much easier to calibrate. Yeah. So yes, that's a good point actually. So for now, we're using rectangle simple channel cross sections, and then I think some of national water model in US river model using trapezoid with flat plane, but we're not using that was changed. Yes, if you go downstream, more wider channel, but also the estimate is also simple equation based on the upstream area. So I'd say now estimate accurate. With probably we can use measured widths because probably we can get from satellite. But for now, I've been using just a simple equation based on upstream area to compute channel width. Oh, that's actually maybe I think I can maybe explain. Maybe I can spend maybe 20 another 20 minutes. But maybe I should mention is parallelizing in the river model, right? It's 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 tricky because hydrologic model is running each unit independently, so easy to split domain and then run a parallel. But the river model cannot do that way, and you have to run upstream first and then downstream later. So that's I have three slides kind of to explain, but maybe I think um, I think I better to explain to you in the past. It's kind of complicated. Um,
Francisco?
Thank you again, Mr. Naki, for your presentation. I have a question that involves when you talked about human intervention in relation to how it affects performance in the modeling process. And I didn't quite catch how you factor for the human intervention in the modeling. Something about naturalizing the flow, but I didn't quite understand if it goes.
you're talking about maybe this one or ah okay. I think I mentioned here. Yeah, so that so I usually get the so naturalized flow means so like any flow point, especially main trunk in Colombia, is not natural because there's a dam or many dams upstream. So and if you run a hydrologic model without any lakes or dam model, yeah, we know not correct. Not reproduce actually observed flow. Observed flow is actually human impacted flow. But what they trying to do is trying to reconstruct and like naturalize flow based on I think reservoir operation like informations. So make it to if reservoir is not located, what's natural flow looks like. So that's a trying to compute for naturalized flow. But personally, I don't do so. As a like as a actually for this particular work, like a U.S. Army, like a government agency, create the data sets.
Mizukami just sorry, Mr. Rod. Just have physical parameters, or you have to calibrate somewhere the parameters of the model.
Yeah, you can calibrate. Yes.
Yeah, but how can you calibrate these parameters when you don't have only observations in a stream flow gauge?
So like one way, maybe one way to do. I might be wrong, but so Mizrat can input observed flow to any segments, and then you can route that observed flow to downstream.
Oh, okay.
And then if you have a downstream observation, you can kind of calibrate only river model parameter, ignoring like a lateral flow input. You might be able to do.
But you have to have the assumption that both stations are close to.
Yeah, I don't think you can do a long separated to gate. Yeah. Yeah, I might not be practical, but
If you don't have other stations, you can do it.
no.
Okay.
Fabian?
out the Columbia River, there are a lot of ERUs that no one touched earlier. Is there a reason for that? In general, how is the process?
So Columbia River Basin. Yes. Oh no, why? Oh, I'm sorry. No, not scientific reason, but technical reason. It's easy to implement. So if you do HRU discretization, it's actually more choices you have to think about.
So that's the same question that I asked you
Yes.
a couple of hours ago.
So we're doing simpler. One GRU has one HRU.
ERU is a catchment?
Yes, catchment. Yes.
So any other questions from our audience? I have a question. So Naoki, well, thank you for the presentation. That was super interesting. So do you think that we're ready for making all these global domain river routing simulations? Because mizu route, if you run kinematic wave, for example, you need a lot of data of the Manning roughness coefficient on channel width. So how do you have you tried to collect that information from all the rivers of the world?
No, but I think some group working on the from satellite data. I don't know detail, but I think I've seen a paper talking about extract Manning N based on satellite, but probably cost resolution. But personally, I haven't looked into detail. Yeah, but yeah, that's important. Yeah.
I have a more philosophical question. Do you think that we were ready to do global domain hydrological modeling? What are your thoughts about how the community is moving nowadays? Like, do you think that we're ready to model river basins that we've never been into? And we don't actually know what are the dominant hydrological processes?
Yeah, for global domain, including like for example, African continent. We probably don't have much observations. We can run it, but it's difficult to evaluate, I guess. Yeah, people doing global hydrologic modeling nowadays. Yes, but the credibility is, I think, still questionable. Yes. Yeah, but I think my opinion, yeah, I think it's probably have to do somehow to move on global domain, and then have to come up with some good way to probably evaluate. Yeah, that's I think I need to do. I think because yeah, if you look at Africa or some parts of like I don't know this Chile or US is lots of gauges and lots of observation. So relatively maybe easier to evaluate hydrologic model, but if you go Africa continent, it's very difficult. I've seen many modeling work, not many, but few modeling like work in African continent, but very simple because I don't think they want to do because you cannot evaluate except using some satellite data. Yeah, but have to I think have to do somehow some innovation needed. I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so there's a lot of work to do in the community. Okay, so last call for questions. No? So if there are not any other questions, so thank you, Naoki, again for visiting us and for your talk. And sí, y con esto cerramos el primero de los seminarios en recursos hídricos y medio ambiente del año académico 2022. Muchas gracias a quienes se han conectado para ver este seminario y también a quienes han asistido de manera presencial. Muy buenas tardes a todas y a todos.